So obviously I'm going to be presenting about using social media for advocacy. Also, please excuse me for using some notes. I have 3 finals next week, so I've been a little busy with studying for that. But yeah. Ooh, it's a little fuzzy picture, but my name's Taylor. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I got involved in advocacy. So when I was 3 years old, my dad was diagnosed with a rare disease called adrenoleukodystrophy. It's an X-linked recessive disease, so that makes me a carrier of the disease. There's no treatment or cure, so my dad passed away when I was 5 years old. So I became an advocate really early on, advocating for greater awareness of ALD and raising more money for the disease, raising more money for research. So I've been an advocate for basically as long as I can remember, since 4th grade, and I became a social media advocate in high school. So most of my experience in advocacy has to do with advocating for rare diseases, but I've also done a lot of advocacy for women's rights issues, especially when it comes to gender bias in the healthcare system, which I'm sure everyone at this conference is very familiar with. Okay, so we'll start by saying, what is advocacy? So it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? So everyone defines advocacy a little bit differently, but to me, it means working to make a positive difference in a cause that you care about. And that cause could be anything from politics to animal rights to healthcare, etc. So anyone can be an advocate. You don't have to come from a certain background. You don't have to have certain connections, and you don't have to be a certain age. And social media is great because it made advocacy all the more accessible. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about social media advocacy, but a lot of the advice that I'm giving can apply to any kind of advocacy that you do now or in the future. So traditional advocacy versus social media advocacy. So traditional advocacy and social media advocacy have the same basic concept, and like I said, that's working to make a positive difference in a cause that you care about. So on this slide, I've listed some examples of traditional versus social media advocacy. They're pretty self-explanatory, but just to say a few, traditional is like writing an article about a cause you care about. This is something I did when I was in 5th grade. I wrote an article and submitted it to a local magazine. But obviously now you can write an article like on an online publication, making an Instagram post about a cause. Traditional is like writing a letter to a member of Congress. Social media advocacy is tweeting to a member of Congress. You pretty much get the gist. So they are all the same basic concept, but social media advocacy just gives you another tool to be able to make the difference that you want to make. Okay. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. So raise your hand if you love social media. Raise your hand if you hate social media. Okay. You might wanted to raise your hand for both. I feel like I definitely would, because a lot of people do have a love-hate relationship with social media. Obviously, it can be super distracting. People don't always act themselves on social media, so it's easy to feel like you're inadequate because of posts that you see. So even though there are a lot of negative things that come from social media, advocacy is definitely one of the positive things that social media has to offer. So social media gives us the ability to do a good thing through advocacy, and it's a positive way to use social media. So it gives us a platform to share our stories and encourage people to take action and make a difference. So it's also great because it gives us a chance to spread our message a lot broader and wider than you are able to with traditional advocacy, to people literally all over the world. I know for one, I've met a lot of great advocates through social media that I've actually never met in person, but we do keep in touch on a regular basis and often share each other's posts, comment on each other's posts, just to help each other spread our messages. So as you could tell, social media is increasingly being used for advocacy with teenagers, celebrities, politicians, sports players, etc. And I think my favorite part about it is that it enables us to be able to use our voice from anywhere, even the bathtub, but literally anywhere, as long as you have Wi-Fi. Okay, so now I'm going to give some tips on how you can become the best social media advocate you can be. So the first is to know your audience. So the important thing to remember is that you don't have to have a ton of friends or followers to be an effective social media advocate. You can still spread an effective message. So before you make a post, it's important to understand who you're trying to reach. So for example, if you did write an article about a cause you care about and you want as many people to read it as possible, you'll want to keep that in mind so you know how to best spread your message. You'll also want to tailor your message. Using the article example, you'll want to write something in the post that will entice people to read your article. So for example, I write a lot of articles about my experience with having a rare disease in my family, being a carrier of a rare disease, and for a lot of people who've never had an experience with rare disease, they might, not be that interested in just reading this article about it because it doesn't affect them personally. So I try to make an effort to, entice people to read it, entice people to share it. And I think that's the most important thing, like getting people who usually don't have a vested interest in what you're saying to become interested in the topic. You also want to make sure that you're clear and concise so that everyone can understand what you're saying. Of course, in the case of diseases and chronic illnesses, like I said, my disease is adrenoleukodystrophy or ALD, but if I'm talking about it in a post, I'll make sure that I don't just use the acronym. I'll first explain what it is, explain a little about the disease. Obviously, the same can go for EDS and a lot of the other conditions. You also, of course, want to be creative and stand out because there's so many posts on social media, so you want to make sure that your post stands out and doesn't just get lost in the mix. And I think one of my favorite things about social media advocacy is that it allows us to apply public pressure. So, for example, I was trying to get in touch. I'm from New Jersey, and I was trying to get in touch with the Department of Health about ALD newborn screening, which was passed a long time ago, but there's been some issues with it. They haven't started screening yet. So I was trying to get in touch with them, leaving them a lot of messages, and they weren't really responding. So I decided to tweet at them and just say, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with you about newborn screening. When are you going to start screening? And they actually ended up calling me back that day and inviting me in to their office. They told me that, in a joking kind of way, that they didn't know what to respond because people don't usually tweet at them. So yeah, as you can see, here's another tweet that I made after we went to visit their office. But it was cool that I only have a few hundred followers, and just because I tweeted at them, they gave me a call back. So that's a perfect example of using public pressure via social media. So something else that's important to remember is that different types of posts work best on different type of platforms, and that all social media sites aren't used in the same exact way. So what I usually do is I'll post about the same thing, but I'll tailor my message to the various different platforms to change up the posts a little and make sure that I'm reaching the target audience that I want on each of the posts. So as you can see, I won't read through all of these, but every social media is used a little bit differently. For example, on Facebook, obviously you only friend people you know or people in your community, so those posts can be targeted as friends, while Instagram and Twitter, if you have a public account, you can send those posts to anyone, and then LinkedIn is for more professional posts. Snapchat is obviously your close friends, but still advocate on there because you got to keep it up everywhere. And then of course YouTube is used for videos. So as I said, you don't have to have a lot of followers to be an effective advocate, but I thought I would include just some tips on how to gain more followers or just how to bring greater attention to your post in general. So if you're comfortable with setting your accounts on on public, this will definitely help. Something that I've done on Facebook, even though I do use my personal page for advocacy, I created more of a public figure page where I share more specific things about advocacy. One, so I'm not just throwing all this stuff on my private page, but also because anyone can like my public page. I don't have to accept them as a friend. So it's easier to be able to have a broader audience of people see it if I'm using my public page. And then I also included that if you are a teenager, obviously you need to get permission from your parents, but I don't think there's any teenagers here, so we can skip over that. So the second is to make sure that you're being consistent in your messaging. So if you want to build a brand as an advocate, you need to make sure that you're posting on a consistent basis. Oh, no problem. Posting on a consistent basis and making sure that people know where you stand about a certain issue. Also make sure that you're always being genuine and honest, and you want to show people who you really are, because as I said, a lot of people do put up a certain front on social media. Obviously we're posting about our best moments, our best pictures, but in the end you want to make sure that you're showing your true self, because people will be able to tell if you're pretending to be someone else. Also, make sure that you're engaging with other people's posts, your friends, your followers. I think people are definitely more likely to like and share your posts. If you like and share their posts, it's a two-way street. You can also, use hashtags, include pictures in your posts. Posts with pictures get a lot more engagement than posts that don't have pictures. So yeah, all of these will lead to higher levels of engagement, which then means higher followers. So also keeping track of your engagement. This isn't 100% necessary, but over the past year, I found that this has been really helpful to me. You can see every social media has different types of engagement trackers, but you can see what posts are working best. And seeing what you should be posting in the future. So for example, the picture here, this is from my private Facebook page that I mentioned. You're able to see your reach, your engagement. You can also promote posts. That costs a little bit of money, so I don't do it too often. But I like seeing this just to see what kind of posts get the most attention and the most reach, because I just want to do my best to be able to share my advocacy, share information about the disease that I carry. Also, I didn't mention this, but I do have my own nonprofit organization, so I'm trying to spread the word as much as I can about that as well. So I definitely want to know what posts will get the best reach. But like I said, this isn't super necessary. Okay. So last but not least, some social media etiquette. So always remember to read over your posts for spelling and grammar. Obviously, on most social networking sites, except for Twitter, you can edit your posts afterwards, so it's not the biggest deal. I found that I actually end up doing this all the time, but I still usually, if it's a longer post, ask my mom to read over it or a friend just to make sure there's not something that I'm just missing. Obviously, the same goes for an essay. Sometimes your eyes just scan over that extra that or something like that. And then, of course, always remember that what you post on the internet is there forever. I don't think I really have to say that to this audience, but obviously you don't want to risk posting something that could isolate your audience or dilute your message. Okay, so now I'm going to show some examples of advocacy posts from some of my friends. They've all given me permission to share their posts for this presentation. So the first is Carly. So as you can see, Carly took to Instagram and she created a post to tell her story about being diagnosed with EDS. So in this post, she writes about her medical history and finally getting diagnosed with EDS after 16 years. So her post is raising awareness about EDS and also making the statement that the diagnostic odyssey that EDS patients is super long. As you can see on the picture, it says 16 years. And I remember when I first saw this post, I wondered, what 16 years for what? And it made me want to read it. And at the end, which you can see, she also used a bunch of different hashtags to make sure that even though people might not follow her, if they're following this specific hashtag, such as my EDS challenge, they'll be able to see her post. So this is Emma. Emma is a rare disease patient and advocate. She created her own organization called Patient Perspective to improve the patient experience. So she often makes posts about invisible illness and about accessibility. And this post in particular, she's calling on patients to remember to thank their healthcare professionals. She also uses a bunch of hashtags at the end. This one isn't posted on her personal page. This is posted on the Patient Perspective page. But of course, she makes sure she shares this on her personal page, asks people to like her page, share her story, etc. So on this slide, we have Alison and Maddy. Alison made a post on her Instagram story encouraging people to ask her questions about EDS. And she's also sharing that May is EDS Awareness Month. So you do have the option on Instagram. You can put a little sticker in your story where people can just type and ask you a question, and then you can share the question and then share your response. So I've definitely found that a lot of people in advocacy have been doing this recently, just because, especially when you have something like a rare disease or a chronic condition, people always have questions. Obviously, you don't have to answer everyone's questions. It's your choice to be able to share as much as you want. But yeah, I thought that was great that Alison was doing that, and she actually did get a lot of questions and shared a lot of their responses. So then this is Maddy. Maddy made a post explaining what her everyday life is like with cystic fibrosis. So she writes that she's happy to be able to educate people as a cystic fibrosis patient. Maddy also makes a lot of YouTube videos to share what her life is like having CF. So clearly both girls are making a difference by raising awareness of their conditions and educating their followers via social media. And this just shows that these platforms are so useful, especially when it comes to a rare chronic condition when a lot of people just simply don't know about them. As we know, spreading awareness is one of the most important things we could do because it can help get people diagnosed. So lastly, me. So when I was in high school, I started feeling kind of isolated about my carrier status. I didn't go into too much detail earlier, but basically this means that I have a 50% chance of passing the disease on to any children I have. I also have the possibility of developing symptoms of the disease in the future. So my future is kind of uncertain. So when I was in high school, probably about 15, I started feeling kind of lonely, didn't really know who I could talk to about it because I didn't know any other carriers my age. So like any girl in high school would do, I took to social media and I created my own Facebook page for young carriers of ALD, just because I wanted to meet other people my age. At the time I was 15 and the youngest carrier I knew was my sister who was 25. But I really wanted to find like other teen girls who found out that they were a carrier in a similar situation that I did, where we could talk about, the things that we were hopeful for, the things we were scared about, just be able to relate on that level of being a teenage girl that is carrying a deadly genetic disease, which obviously most people can't relate to. So I still run this page today, and it has 120 members. So that's been, I guess I started this about 6 years ago, and it's definitely been really successful with bringing young carriers together. So now you might be wondering how to get started as a social media advocate, and it really is quite simple. So I just listed 5 basic steps to be started as an online advocate. So the first is to determine what causes you are passionate about. Obviously being here, you're already passionate about a certain cause, but like I said, this presentation isn't specifically about advocating for illnesses or certain diseases. This can literally be about anything. So the second step you can do is to join groups and like pages with like-minded individuals. This can give you the opportunity to meet other people that you can advocate with. For example, me and Antonio are in a young adult advocacy group together, which he's going to be talking about later. So yeah, that helps you meet people that you can advocate with online. The third is to share your story and the stories of others affected by the issue. Like I said, you don't have to share anything that you're not comfortable with. You don't have to give any details. But I've always found that sharing my story has helped me cope with the loss of my dad and cope with the circumstances that I'm given, which I'm going to talk about a little more in the next slide. The fourth is to develop a call to action. So this is really important, and this is something that a lot of people forget about when they make a social media post. So a call to action obviously is what you want someone to do in response to your post. So typically on social media, a lot of my calls to action are just something like and share this post to keep spreading the word. It doesn't have to be something like donate, even though it can be, or for example, if there's a certain legislation that affects your community, it can be call your members of Congress, tweet at your members of Congress, but always remember to include a call to action, even if it's just liking and sharing the post. 5, encourage others to spread your message. I know a lot of my friends who are not involved in the rare disease community at all are super supportive. They always share things when I post them. They share my videos, they share my articles, just because they know how important it is in my rare disease community to keep spreading awareness. So I don't even have to ask them anymore. They just do it because they just know that that's what I want them to do. So I obviously appreciate that a lot, but it's just important to make sure that others are spreading your message. And then 6, just repeat. So like I said, over the years, I've definitely built a brand of being a social media advocate. So I'm always posting different things, different articles I see, posting about different things that I do. For example, I'm definitely going to take a picture later, post about the conference, post about what I spoke about, just to continue with that social media advocate brand, and to keep being able to spread my message. Okay. So all in all, I think the best thing about advocacy in general is that it really is a two-way street. So in the process, you get to empower yourself, and it does provide a sense of fulfillment while also empowering others and inspiring them to possibly share their stories or get involved in advocacy as well. So I've always found it super cathartic to share my story, especially being 5 years old when my dad passed away. It took a long time for me to finally open up and talk about it just because I always felt so different. So I started sharing my story when I was really young. Like I said, through the forms of writing articles, or I would speak at fundraisers. Now I do it a lot through social media, and I find that it still helps me be able to, cope with the challenges that have happened in my life and that are given to me, because I feel like the best way I can honor my dad is through sharing my story and through raising awareness of his disease. And I know that my dad would have done the same for me. So, everyone finds a reason to advocate. That's my main reason to advocate. But everyone has their own reason. And in the end, anyone can be an advocate. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions, or if anyone wants to take a selfie later to post on their social media, I'll be around. So, yeah.
Which platform do you think is the best for advocacy?
I would say probably Facebook, because I use both my private page. I accept a lot of people if we have a lot of mutual friends in the rare disease community. So there is a lot of people that I don't necessarily know in person, but I find that most of my posts probably get the most engagement on Facebook. And then, like I said, I also have my private page, but I'm usually sharing things from my public page to my private page. It gets kind of complicated. Me and my mom call it the real Taylor Kane page and the fake Taylor Kane page. So, yeah.
So you think Facebook overall, as far as I know, tailoring it to the younger age, like Twitter, which I'm learning to tweet. I still don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of repeat. So, but
yeah. So I think at least for my age demographic, I'm 20. I think that a lot of 20-year-olds are on Facebook again, mostly because you kind of have to be for things involving college. Everyone comes back on Facebook for college. But as for younger teenagers go, I think maybe Instagram. I don't really know what the young... Snapchat. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Doesn't that disappear?
It disappears, and also, everyone has a limited number of friends.
Yeah, it disappears.
Yeah. But yeah, I think probably for younger teens, probably Instagram. But yeah, like I said, you can have a private page or a public page. A lot of people don't like having public pages because anyone can see your page, but my page now, I post a lot about advocacy, so I just decided that I would make it public. Even though I still post things about my personal life, not every post I make is about being an advocate, I still have it public. I also think it's important to make sure that your own personality and who you are shines through, because I think if you just if you're only using it for advocacy, people aren't able to see what you are in your everyday life. I feel like it's important for people to see that I still am living my life as a normal 20-year-old girl in college while being an advocate and being a carrier of disease on the side. I think it's important for people to know that it's just one aspect of my life and that advocacy doesn't have to take up your whole life. So that's why I continue to use my pages for my personal college posts. Obviously nothing bad. But also my advocacy posts as well.
When you talk about your personal page, are you talking about your Facebook profile, or do you actually have a page in addition for your personal page?
Yeah, so I think I talked about this at the beginning before you came. So I have my personal Facebook profile, and then I have a public page. But honestly, I still post most of my stuff on my personal page, just because I don't know. I share them mostly on both.
Sometimes it's easier rather than going up, toggling and clicking.
Yeah, and because my friends on Facebook are used to it now, seeing all my advocacy posts, and a lot of them want to keep updated on what I'm doing. They've told me that, I'm not just assuming. But so I usually post things on my personal page. But also I post a lot on my Instagram, which is public. I also have an Instagram for my nonprofit, but there's also a lot of overlap between those. But yeah, I also, if anyone's interested in seeing my posts, this was at the very beginning, but I have my different names. So yeah, the Facebook, that is my public figure Facebook page, so that one's just for advocacy. But then I also make sure to post on LinkedIn, especially because I'm getting to the end of college, so gotta get in the job field. But yeah, I'm very active on all my social media. I definitely post a lot about advocacy, but also just post a lot in general, because I found that that's the best way to keep people engaged. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.